Good afternoon. This is the Thursday, September 20th, 2018 meeting of the Athens City Planning Commission. All members are present. A quorum has been established. Is there anyone who intends to speak before the commission today? If they can just raise their right hand. And do you solemnly swear to tell the truth to the commission as you know it? Yeah. Thank you. Disposition of minutes. Are there any comments?
Motion to adopt.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Let's see. Mr. Suroy also is not in attendance today. He's attending a conference. So Mr. Logue is still here, though. There are no cases on the dockets today. Communications, Cornwall Properties, 65 North Court Street, a preliminary hotel plan. Mr. Logue, do you have that information?
I do.
Okay.
I do, and very briefly, this is a Title 41 communication for 65 North Court Street in Athens. According to a memo provided by Code Director Mr. Rick Sorois, the applicant has submitted preliminary plans for the construction of a 3-story, 10-room hotel with a first-floor restaurant, bar, and rooftop patio. And as many of you on the Planning Commission may recall, this location was previously approved 2 years ago, September of 2016. For a 30-room hotel with conditional parking requirements, which will also need to be addressed with this project. The Cornwalls have secured an architect, AODK, of Madison Avenue in Lakewood, Ohio, and the property owner is Mr. David Cornwell, who is here to speak this afternoon. Estimated cost of the project is $500,000 with a proposed square footage, 9,974 square feet. And that is all the information that Mr. Sorois presented, and I believe Mr. Cornwell is here if he would.
Okay. Mr. Cornwell, do you care to come up to the podium and speak to the project? And when you go up, could you please just state your name and your address?
Do you want to office somewhere right in front? My name is David Cornwell. My address is 42 Strauss Run Road, Athens, Ohio.
Let's see.
And the one thing I probably need to dispute, the 500,000.
Go ahead.
We probably need to multiply that times almost 3. That's very conservative. I don't know where that came from.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cornwell at this time?
You know, I brought for you guys to look at. Let's see if I can. These are copies of per floor.
Thank you.
Probably changed a touch since you looked at it.
Okay.
So the first floor will be a little bit different.
So, Mr. Cornwell, would you like to talk us through each floor and what we're looking at, what the plan is for each floor?
Sure. Well, you know, the first floor, we're still, you know, I've spent the last month really racking my brain trying to see, you know, what works on that end of town, you know, without doing, as you know, the 2 businesses that I own, we're trying to it looks like bar restaurant, but it's not going to be on the scale that J-Bar and Courtside Pizza are on, as far as a student-occupied space. So we are still addressing that as we speak. The layout is done, but the details, as far as you see where the kitchen is just a generic, you know, open room right now. We haven't gotten far enough to lay that out to what we're planning. The second floor, there are 9 rooms. There's an entrance you can see on the first floor from Court Street sidewalk. It's separate from the entrance into the restaurant. So that has access to a stairway and to the elevator. And the elevator, we're saving that, and that will be only serviceable to the 3rd floor. We will access the rooftop with a stairway that you can see, you should be able to see on there. And the rooftop will have 1 suite and an outside patio area, which will be roughly 50 people.
So you did say that the elevator will not access.
Will not. We investigated it. Well, originally, Steve, as you know, we went through, this is the 3rd stage of this building. The 2nd stage was completely ripping the building down, which would have been a new elevator. So we're preserving the building, and that elevator is not capable of going to the 3rd floor. It wouldn't be cost-wise to do it. And we would spend more saving that than it would be just stopping. There's no point. We might as well rip it out if we went to the 3rd floor. So,
What's your timeline on everything?
as far as construction,
Yeah.
roughly a year. Hopefully we start early 2019 is my goal. So lining up contractors, subcontractors.
Is the building fire protected now?
There's not sprinkler. No.
Okay. So, and that'll be part of this construction.
Oh yeah.
Has it appears as though in your design team, Blue Streak is the subconsultant for like the civil site work, or perhaps their mechanical. I'm not exactly sure. Just looking at the top of this, have they been in touch with city staff about access to utilities in the area?
I don't want to comment because I'm not sure, because I could say something inaccurate. I mean, I know where things are as far as the main. I know it's on the opposite side of the street, so that's something that we'll have to attack once we get farther along.
Being a pretty old part of the city, there's a lot going on underneath the ground in this portion of Court Street. That said, this use absolutely will work with the utilities that are there and available, but I would ask that earlier rather than later, the subconsultant that's doing the site work design contacts the city and the city staff and identifies where those are and gets them into the plans, just so you can get it into your costing.
Now, is the main, it is across the street, am I accurate?
Well, there's two. There's 2 water mains. And the one that you need to access is a little further across the street for a sprinkled building. Yeah, but it's not all the way across.
At J-Bar, that's what we had to do.
Right.
We had to dig across, and you remember that.
Yeah, it's a different block. It's a little bit different in this section of Court Street than J-Bar. But yeah, that is, in general, that's the situation. Can you describe, and perhaps you talked about this the last time this came through in its other configuration, just the mechanism by which people check in and out in such a small boutique hotel setting?
We're still figuring that part out too. If you look at the first floor, that hall is wide. There is access to the restaurant, so that little space on the left side, which would be on the south side of the building, south front, we'll probably put a little kiosk there for check-ins, because it's kind of a dead space, and then there's a door that there's access to that hall to get upstairs that can be open and closed to let guests in and out.
Gotcha.
And then when the restaurant's closed, they'll have access from the sidewalk to get into their rooms. We just haven't come to the conclusion on what the best way to do it is.
Challenge is how you check in folks when there's nobody in the restaurant, if they still need to get in afterwards.
They're getting in at midnight.
Sure.
How do we address that?
Right.
So
right. I understand. I've seen these. There's a really similar design, a little bit bigger building in Sandusky that opened recently with a first floor restaurant and like the service desk, and then a 3rd floor patio, like a patio bar that's open sometimes.
Right.
But there are more rooms, and so they have a full-time front desk there.
Right.
I can't imagine that you'd be able to staff.
And that's what we're running into. It's not going to be cost prohibitive to have someone there 24/7. Right. The weekends we probably will, because we'll need to have security there. So probably till 2 in the morning we'll have someone regardless. But see how it goes.
Sure.
But 10 rooms, yeah. I hope there's no problems. I mean, they're going to be big weekends. We're just going to have people there. It's inevitable. So.
Okay.
Anything else at this time?
So what's the required parking? Do you know?
For the hotel
Yeah.
use, it is one parking space for every 2 units or 2 rooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not sure what it would be for the bar restaurant. I believe that's on a square footage basis with a minimum of 3 or something like that.
okay.
Offhand, I apologize. I don't
Yeah,
have
that's
that
okay.
information.
So I guess with 9 spaces, does that generally seem like it will be compliant?
I'm not sure. It seems like there's probably a few missing.
Okay.
Rick in his memo specifically said conditional parking requirements, which will also need to be addressed. So I'm assuming that among my guests, and Mr. Cornwell can speak, but you and your family own several other properties very close by,
Right.
and that there may be opportunity to use some of that for this purpose.
And we originally were 30 rooms that, Steve knows the story, but to service our guests correctly, and I started doing the math, how many cars on a certain weekend we'd have, and I'm like, we need a parking lot, just devoted to this hotel, and I don't functionally see that happening. The way it is now, with 10 rooms, we're going to use, there's parking behind the jewelry store that my sister owns, so we'll lease that, because the worst thing, we don't want to go into this and say, oh, good luck, park, maybe you'll find something on Congress Street.
Yeah.
So we need to have good service and cater our guests so they can park as close as they can. So.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Cornwell. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Moving on to our report from the city planner, Mr. Logue.
Just a few items for this afternoon. The first of which, as you may be aware, is that last week at the Athens County Regional Planning Commission, we agreed to form an ad hoc committee to assist with providing some guidance to interested parties in the Plains area who are motivated to consider options for establishing a zoning ordinance within that area. And so myself and Mayor Patterson and a few other members of the Regional Planning Commission agreed to assist with trying to figure out the best course or the best path to move forward with that if they're interested. Not necessarily getting into the weeds as to what the zoning scheme may look like, but just to try to figure out under Ohio Revised Code and state and local regulations what is the best strategy for them to move forward with this if they choose to. So we're hoping to convene our first meeting sometime next week. We don't have a date yet. I expect it will be either be Tuesday late afternoon or Friday late afternoon at the OSU Extension office.
Is all the area inside the 3-mile limit? Subdivisions?
Yes, it should be. I believe this southern area of Dover Township is also in the city. And we haven't really discussed that part of it yet, but I believe the 3-mile rule states that it's only applicable in unincorporated areas without their own zoning regulations. And so at that point, that area of the Plains would not be under the city's guidance, which is not a bad thing, but the remainder of the unincorporated areas still would. So, thank you. I forgot. That's a good point.
At what point would the city be trying to collect some thoughts from the current city of Athens residents as far as like getting their feedback on something like annexation?
I don't know. That is a really good question. We haven't got into those details yet. I don't see much interest from residents in that area to be annexed into the city. I don't think there'd be much support from residents as the city pushing forward with an annexation. But in the past, that has been discussed. At least for the purposes of this committee, I don't think that's going to be the main point of our discussion. But it may be something, I'm sure we'll be touching on that. Yeah. It's a good conversation for the city to be having, though. Typically when we talk about annexation, it's looking at how to grow commercially, not how to grow residential property. That can be sometimes a loss leader with police, fire, and roads.
Would this necessarily diminish then, for instance, Athens Townships, they handle some of the maintenance issues and stuff. Would this basically, in an annexation, that would relieve them of that, correct? Or
if the city were to annex, I believe the roads would become city streets at that point, so they would be under our domain. If the township, if the Plains, which I'm assuming they likely will, if the Plains remains the Plains and it either incorporates itself into its own village, then that would become the village's responsibility. Or a more likely scenario would be that it remains an unincorporated community that is under the jurisdiction of the county and the township, and it has, for portions of it, there's a zoning regulations.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some fast-growing townships on the periphery of several of the larger cities that remain unincorporated but have zoning.
Oh yeah,
I think about Northern Fairfield County as an example, where there's several townships there that the township government is pretty robust in those situations to be able to manage. Now it's much faster growing and more dense than
Orange
Plains
Township, Genoa Township,
Violet Township,
Prairie Township, Violet. All four of those are very highly functioning. They have limited home rule. These townships, and they have their own township police force, fire department, township manager, who operates in zoning and subdivision regulations.
that play a significant role in taxation as far as what the city might be able to get in terms of the cost of city services and whatnot? Would something, again, revenue in the form of taxes revert more to the city of Athens than
if it were
township?
If it were annexed?
Yeah.
It should, in likelihood, because income taxes for people who live in that area who don't work in the city, then they would be paying income taxes because they would now live in the city. Townships cannot, I don't believe townships can collect income tax. They
get off of
property
tax, right?
Correct, right. Yeah. And I think they could probably assess a tax for emergency services, but I'm not sure on that either. But that may actually also be an additional real estate.
And just to be clear, with the questions you're asking, during the Planning Commission meeting that we just recently had, annexation wasn't a topic that was being bantered about.
You're right.
Nor really was there for the Plains to become a village, because that was something that I was curious about.
Right.
You know, whether the will was there to become an incorporated village, because their population, I believe, is roughly 2,000, if I'm not mistaken.
One of the newspaper articles reported about 3,000, I think, by census, and that's. But it depends, since there's no physical definition of where the boundaries are. It's definitely arguable.
It's really one of the densest areas I've ever seen, certainly, that isn't incorporated on its own. Right?
Yeah, that's usually what people say. It's the largest unincorporated community in Ohio. At least that's what I've heard. I don't have anything to back that up. And it does get complicated because it straddles two different townships, so that even makes it more complicated.
And with zoning, that was, again, one of the big challenges as we had the Planning Commission meeting, was to sit, and because we weren't talking just Athens Township, we're talking Dover Township as well.
Yeah.
And there was an individual there who had been collecting petitions for Dover, for that portion of the Plains also to have zoning. It's an interesting problem to be working through.
Yeah.
I believe the county engineer is also on the ad hoc committee. Is that correct?
Yes, Jesse Powers, the county planner, Jeff Maiden, county engineer,
Right.
Paige A. Lost from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, who serves on the Regional Planning Commission, myself, Mayor Patterson, and two residents from the Plains area, one of which lives in the Dover Township area and another lives in the Athens Township area.
And I don't want to speak beyond the my role, but certainly, the administration at this time, there's no, I guess, I don't want to say desire, but there's no intent to seek annexation. If residents in that area were interested and they organized themselves and approached the administration and the council and the city and said, hey, we want to come in and be part of the city of Athens, certainly at that point, I think we would think about it and look at it, but it's not something that we intend to go out and campaign for or anything.
Let's see. Was there anything else? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Loeb,
Yes.
Kurt Johnson, who was on the Planning Commission a long time ago, put together a Athens Township zoning ordinance.
Okay.
It's in the library, it's in the archives, I think. It failed miserably.
At Alden or at the Alden Art?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it could be anywhere, maybe Gary Hunter's archives have it. It was excessively, at least to suggest one of the options, excessive control of animals and potential use of land was a thing that was very, pretty much probably shot it down.
Yeah.
In addition just to anti-government. But I would suggest that people look at it.
I'll see if I can find that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but Lisa has it.
You recall how long ago that was?
Oh, a long time. I think it was the end of Kurt John's, and he moved on. I mean, it was a little bit contentious.
Thank you.
Let's see, how long have I been here? 50 years, maybe 40.
Okay, sometime in the 70s, late 70s.
Yeah, there was also one over in, to stop an injection well, and then the state just stepped in and said, no, you
Right.
can't do that. And with township zoning, that was in, starts with a K, over in Jackson County. It was Browning Ferris. I don't know, those are just two experiences
Okay.
we
Thank you.
have. Volunteer.
Was there any other items?
I'll just briefly on the city's comprehensive plan update. Online surveys are still available as reported at the last meeting in the minutes until October 7th. We are starting campus engagement next week on Wednesday and Thursday. I think Wednesday and Thursday we will be doing, we're going to be setting up at the county courthouse, trying to catch students specifically as they're going about. Getting some brief survey information from them, and then if there's any other uptown employees, anybody else who's interested, we'll try to catch them, trying to get some feedback from students. And then October 10th in the evening, we're going to do a workshop at Baker Center for students. We've identified leaders from individual campus groups to try to get them to attend, but also be available to all students. And then on Thursday, October 11th, I think I've got my dates correct, we'll be doing a workshop with a geography class on campus. And really appreciative Ohio University Student Senate has embraced this, and they were pleased to hear some approach from the city to make sure that we're getting student input into this process. So that's been great. Thank you.
Did Mr. Suroy leave any information?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, we'll move on then. There's no one in our live audience to address the commission. Announcements and other business?
I have one announcement. This Sunday, excuse me, at 2 p.m. out on Phase 2 of the Northwest Bike Path Spur, correct? There will be a dedication of the new art bench out across from where Little Fish is, but looking over our wetlands. So that's open to anyone who chooses to come out and partake in the dedication.
And I have one announcement. Last meeting we discussed briefly the partnership, the mayor discussed the partnership that we entered into, the MOU with Drive Ohio. We had a meeting with Drive Ohio here earlier this week with city staff and members from Drive Ohio, as well as a couple folks from Ohio University and our Athens Transit. I direct members of the commission to a recent press release from the Ohio Department of Transportation about the Scioto Mile in Columbus, which is a pretty big announcement about an autonomous shuttle that is going to operate on the near west side of the city of Columbus, and it's rolling out now. And I think that this technology is coming a little faster, I think, than we probably know. And so I think this commission probably in the future, not tomorrow or anything, but in the coming months and years, should look at, from a planning perspective, what we need to think about when autonomous vehicles arrive.
Anything else? Our next meeting will be October 4th, 2018. With the business of the Athens City Planning Commission concluded, this meeting stands adjourned.